Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information that's hopefully useful for your everyday life. Now, we are at the peak of spring here in South Korea. Flowers are in full bloom and generally the weather is really nice. But for those who suffer from hay fever, it can be one of the most uncomfortable times of the year. I'm glad to say we have our Oh Soo-young in the studio to talk about what causes springtime allergies and how to deal with these symptoms. So, Soo-young, I hear that today's issue is one that's extremely personal to you.
That's right, Mark. I'm among the growing number of South Koreans who suffer from hay fever. Around 17% of South Korea's adult population with allergies. That's according to the country's weather agency. I've been suffering from hay fever since I was about 10, and it always comes in spring around this time. There are around 3 periods during the year when you get hay fever, and if you're affected in spring, it means you're allergic to pollen from trees. In summer, it's pollen that's released by grass, and if you get symptoms around early fall, then the pollen comes from weeds.
Well, I think I must be lucky because I've never suffered from hay fever in my life, but I've heard that it is horrible. My grandparents used to get it really terribly. But tell us more about how exactly pollen triggers this allergic reaction in a certain number of people.
Right, well, basically, once the pollen enters your system, either through your nose or when it makes contact with your eyes, then it basically triggers your immune system, more specifically the mast cell, which releases a very strong chemical called histamine, which causes swelling of blood vessels, itchy eyes, a runny nose, and lots of sneezing. And for more severe cases of hay fever, the symptoms can be much worse, leading to headaches, earaches, excessive tiredness, and worsening of asthma. So think of it like this: it's basically your body fighting to, defend it from foreign substances. In this case, it's pollen, which is actually quite harmless. So, yes, it's an overreaction.
Right. Well, it's good to know that there's medication out there for that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment's time. But so this happens only in certain seasons. Spring is one of those seasons, and here in Korea we've had some really warm weather recently, so spring has come earlier than normal. So it's safe to assume then that this is really not a good time for hay fever sufferers.
Right, you're absolutely right. A professor I spoke to at Hanyang University Seoul Hospital, he said that the changes in the weather, the warming of the planet, can actually affect hay fever and make the period of suffering, should we say, much longer.
As temperatures rise, trees and plants grow stronger and flowers blossom earlier too, so the period of exposure to pollen gets longer. So recently we've seen a growing number of patients suffering from hay fever.
So, Soo-young, those of our viewers like you who get hay fever in the spring, what kind of trees should they try to avoid if possible?
Well, researchers say there are about 13 types of trees on the Korean peninsula that you should try and actively avoid because they release allergy-causing pollens.
Right.
And among those, the worst offenders would be oak trees, which make up about 1/3 of the country's greenery. The pollen from oak trees starts to spread from the end of February, and the amount of pollen peaks between April and May. Pine trees and alder trees also release pollen that triggers hay fever. Ginkgo trees were on the list too, so it's not just the pungent smell that you need to look out for.
Yeah.
And you can actually check whether pollen levels are high in your own city or province on the link provided here, as well as a forecast of the next 2 days. And the stronger the colour, the higher the pollen count.
Well, it's good to know that there's help out there for people who suffer from hay fever. I do know that it's very uncomfortable indeed. What are some of the ways sufferers can go about alleviating their symptoms, because you cannot live your life just avoiding trees all the time?
Right, well, there's some over-the-counter medication that could help reduce the symptoms. So oral drugs that contain antihistamine suppress your allergic reaction to pollen. I take it myself and find it very effective.
Doesn't that make you very sleepy, though?
It does, it does. It makes you drowsy, so you should refrain from driving, actually, if you take it. And you should also be cautious if you're pregnant or taking other medication.
So read the back of the label carefully.
Exactly, that's vital. Yes, and there are also nasal sprays and eye eye drops that you could use.
Yeah.
And if your symptoms are extremely severe, then you should really consider immunotherapy, which involves increasing doses of pollen to your body so that it builds up some immunity there. But I would say that the best course of action is to consult a doctor to find out exactly what type of tree pollen you're allergic to and map out a treatment plan that works best for you.
So, for example, if you don't have any medicine at home to treat your hay fever, are there any other ways about trying to lessen your symptoms somewhat?
Well, there are some guidelines that health professionals have given. They've recommended a couple of measures, such as avoid going out between 5 to 10 a.m. That's when pollen counts are at their highest, and you should take medicine if you have it about half an hour before you go outdoors. Doctors also advise you wear sunglasses and a mask, which could look a bit creepy at 5 a.m. And also add a dab of Vaseline inside your nostrils to trap the pollen before it gets further into your system.
Have you tried that?
I actually haven't.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should. Well, right, and once you've been out, if you go home, once you go indoors, you should wash your face with soap.
Yeah.
I've personally found this very helpful with itchy eyes. This measure I haven't tried either, putting a hot towel over your head to sort of steam your eyes, or some warm tea bags over your eyes to soothe the symptoms. And also adjusting your diet could really help. There are some foods you should actively avoid as they can trigger allergy causing reactions.
Yeah.
And this list mostly includes fermented and aged foods like kimchi, cheese, yeast-based foods, as well as beverages. So that means you really shouldn't drink alcohol. You also want to avoid sweet or savory foods, anything really with preservatives or flavoring. And some bad news for vegans and brunch-loving hipsters, avocados are also on the list. So if you suffer from hay fever, then you should really hold yourself back from those fancy smashed avocado toasts.
Yeah, I've never been a massive fan of avocado, so it shouldn't bother me too much, refraining from eating avocado. But I hear there's another culprit that you should avoid if you possibly can as well, and that's almond milk. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. Soy-based products are also off the list, so no more soy lattes for our hipsters.
Right.
So more bad news. Instead, you should really aim to have fresh, unprocessed foods. Experts recommend tomatoes, potatoes, broccoli, and oily fish like salmon or mackerel.
Okay, so the hipsters are out of luck if they have hay fever, then it seems, and I do look forward to seeing you in the office with some Vaseline up your nose,
And
dripping,
a mask.
dripping out of your nostrils. But I think, yeah, very good ideas, very good guidelines to follow. Watch what you eat, take medication where necessary, but keep in mind that there are these at-home remedies you can use as well, right?
Yes, and they work for other allergies as well, because basically it triggers the same chemical reaction.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we hope your symptoms don't get any worse and we move into summer so you can don't have to endure this hay fever issue too much. Soo-young, thank you very much for your reporting today.
Thank you for having me.